right, let's get started. Approving the meeting minutes, which is at 12:05, but we can do it now, right?
Roll call.
Roll call. All right, let's see who's here. Lee Smith,
Present.
Mark Howell,
Present.
and Elizabeth Akers-Moore is present. Okay. Now let's go to approve meeting minutes, which I reviewed. I did not have any comments.
Yeah. Move we approve the meeting minutes of January 15th.
Second.
Great, all in favor, Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Howell,
Yes.
and Ms. Akers-Moore says yes. Fantastic. So I guess we'll get into Chris, any legislative updates?
No legislative updates. I didn't the governor does have appears to have an ambitious transportation agenda this year, but her State of the State speech was really hinted on some austerity measures that they're considering, and there's no current discussion of 9C budget cuts for this legislative session, but this fiscal 26 budget, I think, is going to be heavily debated. Last year, the governor signed the state budget on July 29th, so we're expecting a similar schedule, and we're not seeing anything. We haven't seen any policy or budget impacts for MCI.
Okay. Any questions about that? Or
I have a question.
yeah.
So is the plan still basically, due to the lack of certainty about using the total amount appropriated for our project, to ask town meeting this spring for money to keep us moving?
I'm certainly in favor of that. We raised it at the select board meeting on Monday night when we were talking about the letter that we need to send to the state in response to the offer of the wastewater treatment facility. We didn't come to a conclusion about a specific amount, but what we did agree to was that the town manager would submit a placeholder article to town meeting that we could discuss later to come up with an amount and a source. I think that in this case, the source is probably appropriate to be free cash. Remember that we got a couple of things. Town meeting's not until June, so we can decide if we think we've secured funding that pays for work in FY26 by then. We don't have to move it. Even if we move it and pass it, we don't have to use it. We could always rescind it later. But I'm, really want to, personally, I want to pursue the belt and suspenders approach to keep this work moving. So I'd much rather know that we had more than one source for funding the planning through the zoning than to find ourselves potentially running out of money. I guess the other comment I'll make is that the town is trying to meet the finance committee's guideline for the town operating budget, and that's pretty tight. It's 2.8% or something like that, and that's well under inflation. They're already talking about cuts and so forth. So, to be able to magically come up with some money to do something that we had, that might make sense to do in FY26 seems to me to be a lot less likely than it might have been in the past. So,
Question mark. I listened to that debate, and we keep talking about 400,000 that we have. What happened to the other 325,000 we had?
So that's the other thing that I was hoping we'd start to talk about. I pulled up Megan's proposed budget from 12/24, and I think that we could, as you know, we had said that we would do this in this subcommittee, and I think we should be looking to update that. The problem with the other 300,000 is it expires on June 30th, just like the 400,000 does. Shannon, sorry.
I
Yes,
thought
ma'am.
that the last budget discussion with the advisory board was that there was gonna be 400,000 reserved for the consulting work with an additional 40,000 as contingency, and the remainder would be for wastewater related items. Chris can speak more to this too, but I thought that until there was some indication that we were going to be spending that first earmark, they weren't going to get moving on the contract for the second earmark, which was going to be for the wastewater related stuff, I thought.
All of it. I remember vague conversations about it, but I don't remember it ever being, maybe I don't remember it being formally
Yeah.
decided. So I think it's a point we need to raise, Mark, and
Right.
what because aren't we spending, I mean, I know we've spent some money already on the wastewater. We're allocating some parts of the contract, but and then we're going to be in the same situation where we have to get that contract, I assume, for the 300. So we should get going on that quickly.
Yeah, I think Shannon's recollection is correct.
Okay.
We were, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but as the A&F group in the state didn't really want to commit to 2 contracts until we could demonstrate we were going to spend the first. Now we have in hand the contract that we're signing with agency any day now, which basically expends that full 400,000. The schedule for that is June 30th. So anything over and above that we're planning to spend by June 30th, we should by all means be approaching the state, I think, at this point for that second contract to be in place to cover that. All that being true, we still run out of money on July 1st,
Right.
because none of that carries over so far. I mean, you know,
Right.
I think if we have some firm contracts and some spending plans, we might be able to make the case that we have committed the funds and then go have that conversation with the state as well, which would be nice to have. But again, they could just say, no, sorry, you didn't spend it by June 30th. So you're on your own. And then we still are stuck if we don't do something at town meeting.
Right. And now, in addition to free cash, we had talked about ARPA. We talked, Lee, I think you'd mentioned the community preservation funds are due in September for the 2026 funding.
Yeah, you know, once again, the Community Preservation Committee already has indicated that they're not going to consider the school committee's off-cycle request for an amenities building. So I don't see why they would change their position for us. I mean, that might be something that also down the road, FY27 or something like that, we could talk about it, but that avenue doesn't seem to be available either.
Okay, so Carrie's going to put together a placeholder, and then are we going to have to come up with more concrete numbers?
Yeah, that's what I would suggest that we take on here,
Okay.
which is, you know, I think there's a couple pieces to that. One is understanding, understanding the spending plan for the agency contract, which is in 2 parts, by the way. It's like tasks 1 through 4, which are the planning part, which expends 400 minus a couple of nickels by June 30th, and then the zoning part, which I believe they had put in 99,000. Is that right, Shannon? We can check that.
Yeah, that sounds
have
about
that
right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't have that written down, but I think it was 99,000 for zoning, which we could also say we've committed to. And so at a minimum, we could be saying we know that we're going to spend 99 on zoning, and make sure that we've got a way to pay for that.
Yeah.
FY26. And then the question is, what else do we need funded?
Okay. So how do we go about that analysis? I mean, the 100,000 is a good place to start. I know you would kind of mention 200 or 200, maybe 225
and that was-
to the board.
Yeah, that was just an order. I was thinking that, you know, if we managed to get 2/3 of the planning work done for 400,000 or something like that, then I was really just going off what it might take to keep that level of effort going at some lower.
Oh, yeah. No, I think it was good to set expectations because I think they were in the more 20,000
Right.
range.
I didn't see what $25,000 was.
Yeah, no, I think that was smart. But how we come up with that concrete number, if we know zoning is gonna be 100,000, do we have to talk about the wastewater, if there's gonna be any more spending on that, or if that's
Yeah.
gonna be, I just don't even know where to start collecting that information.
And Alan made the point, and I agree with it, that, you know, there is a sewer improvement fund, enterprise fund ability. So because they're an enterprise, they have the ability to do some capital planning for themselves, and I think we should consider that as one of our sources. But we also need to understand that that's probably mainly focused on just that. What does it cost to connect the MCI sewer system to the town of Concord sewer system, and all, you know, map those utilities and all that great good stuff. Wonderful to do, but that doesn't help us out at all if we're trying to figure out what to do with historical buildings, or you know, plan for the you know, some recreation or whatever the other components are that we might be doing, environmental studies, those kinds of things. I think that it's probably appropriate for us to go back to the land use committee and the public engagement committee and say, okay, you guys have started to think through what you're doing. What do you anticipate needing in FY26? If you have any thoughts about FY27, let's get them down and
Yep.
start developing that. Again, we don't really need to have a number until we actually go to the hearing. Would be nice to have a number then. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what the date is for the hearing where we would do such an article, but we'll know it soon. And then obviously by town meeting, we need to have some kind of presentation that says these are the things that we're thinking we'd spend on.
I think that all makes a lot of sense. So our subcommittee is coming in with this 100,000 to start. I just rounded it up
Yeah.
to 100,000 for
Yeah.
zoning. And then we asked the other committees to start thinking about what their asks would be. In terms of process, should I reach out to the other subcommittee chairs and just kind of put that in their head for their next meeting?
I think for their next meetings, we should. And I like we use this construct, we've used it in the past for like the Giroux Park. You know, there's a table that says sources and uses. This is where we expect to source money from. This is where we expect to use money.
Yep.
It's not really a budget exactly, but it's kind of a project level view of, you know, what the puts and takes are.
How much do we go outside? How much do we say on that ARPA and then the housing? Lee, your group also has offered some money, I think, for some planning.
That's the housing trust.
Yeah, the housing trust.
Right.
So
I think they came up with 50K or something.
yeah, I just don't know how much, if we're putting together, if our ask is for free cash, whether we don't even kind of go into those for sources and uses, or whether we do put that all together now.
I think ARPA's off the table.
Yeah.
Okay.
To the extent that it hasn't already been committed, yes.
Okay, so ARPA's off the table, community preservation funds we think are off the table because they're not gonna fund anything else.
Yeah, not in
That's
this.
just till the next cycle,
Yeah,
which I warn starts really early.
yeah, like, you know, by the summertime, we'd need to be talking about an application for the next year.
Due September, right?
And I'm not sure which category, it's premature, but which category we might be seeking funds from.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess it would make sense to start the sources and use kind of table, and we add those things on it, put everything on it, and then look at viability. With our focus being on the 200 we're gonna ask for something around that from the town.
Right. And
Okay.
related to this, I would sort of remind us of back when we got these earmarks allocated and there was a lot of concern about whether we could spend them and what we do and so forth. That at that point, I had gone back to Simon and had a conversation with him and said that, you know, I would commit that we would tell him how much we expected to use by June 30th in the March timeframe. So that's coming up. And that's because, you know, there's some sensitivity to around, you got this earmark and you used it or didn't use it, or, you know, anticipating that we may want to get on some kind of campaign for whatever the remainder of that is to be extended, because that would be a great way to avoid having to draw down our own free cash if we don't think we're going to spend the 325 or whatever that number is.
So that goes back to what we were saying about what has been used for wastewater, what is gonna be used for wastewater. And then I know there was all the talk about what we were gonna try to say had already been used by
Yeah.
staff time, which may not be to our advantage if we're trying to get them to extend more funding.
Yeah, but I think I think it's reasonable for us to say, well, we've already spent what we know we're going to spend, or, you know, have contracts in place to spend. And if there's any remaining uncommitted balance, then we should talk about that.
Where is that number for the wastewater treat? I mean, do we have a concrete number of what we've allocated for that?
I think it's budgeted at 265.
Is
That's
that the
for
one?
studies
That's the Weston and Sampson contract?
for evaluation.
In addition to other costs, I believe so.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Could I just ask on that point, you started talking, Mark, about the select board meeting Monday and discussion of wastewater treatment plant. Could you just be more specific about, and I think it was in the context of the offer to purchase, but can you just be more specific? What were you really talking about?
Oh, yeah. So back in October, the town received a letter offering us the wastewater treatment facility, and that letter had a response due by February 24th. So we were working on the draft of that letter, and there was a paragraph in that draft that talked about whether or not the select board voted to support that, but whether or not the select board was also proposing an article for town meeting to support planning for the wastewater treatment facility, and if there was funding associated with that. And that we got kind of stuck on that. And then, Alan came forward and saying, well, the wastewater treatment enterprise actually has money that they could expend towards that. So I was trying to be more expansive and say, well, we're going to put forward an article that's just, that's broadly for MCI planning that we could use on whatever transportation, environmental, whatever we need. And the board balked at that. So they didn't want, and they also didn't see the need to commit to a number and that action in a letter that's just saying, hey, we're interested and these are the things we want to talk about. So they pulled that sentence out of the letter, but we agreed that we would ask the town manager to put together a placeholder so we could revisit this subject of whether or not we need to commit some funding for MCI planning in FY26 anyway.
Follow-up question. So
Sure.
my understanding was like there was an initial deadline to respond to the offer to purchase it. That was like 6 months ago. You sent some form of communication that basically said, all right, you've met that deadline.
Yes.
It sounds like you're preparing a response that meets a second deadline. So I guess my big picture question is, at what point, if ever, will the town be making an actual offer to purchase the wastewater treatment plant?
That's part of the timing is part of the negotiation. So we recognize that the wastewater treatment facility needs to continue to operate, and so does the state. So one of the points in the letter is discussion of what that transition might be. Does DOC continue to operate it? Do we create some kind of operating agreement where we start to operate it, but they still own it. The state
Is there
has,
a deadline to work all that out?
no, there's not really a deadline. The legislation said that it needed to be offered to the town within 6 months, and the town needed to respond based on the letter that they gave us. And now this is, so from there, there's some flexibility in it. DCAM, which is really negotiating this part, has indicated that they're not going to try to, they're willing to work with us so that we don't end up having to have a special town meeting over it.
Okay.
So it's not going to come before this town meeting. It's too soon.
Yep.
I think that it's kind of likely to be ready for action by town meeting, spring of 26. But if it's not, there might be something else in there that covers that. It seems to me that the wastewater treatment facility discussion is pretty, it's relatively straightforward. It's technical, it's a lot of money, but there's not really any real disagreement about what the best thing to happen here is, that the town should take it over, find a way to integrate it. The questions are going to be more around how that actually works, and what sorts of considerations are there going to be around the capital planning for that, because it needs work.
Okay, just my 2 cents. I can fully appreciate the urgency to spend as much money we could given the current appropriation, and that it was a good use of funds to dedicate some of that to the wastewater treatment plant evaluation.
Yeah.
Get it? Totally on board. Just for consideration, I wonder whether going forward, we should maybe bifurcate money related to the wastewater treatment plant future versus the actual redevelopment of the MCI property, with the caveat that yes, they're interrelated and presumably the new development would hook up to it, but one's like a utility enterprise and the other is a full-on redevelopment enterprise. And I don't know that we want this committee / the town to be diverting funds that we need for the redevelopment when it should be in the utility bucket.
I would agree with that point. I think there's a kind of a fairly big ticket item buried in here, which I don't know the size of, but I think in order of magnitude, it's a 7-figure number, which is what it would actually cost to make the interconnection between the MCI facility and the town facility. That's a capital project in and of itself. The logical place to do that is probably the pumping station by Dino's on Main Street, which means you're putting some kind of sewer pipe under the river to get to the wastewater. And we know from the Novo Riverside development discussions that sewering that place was, I want to say, 900,000 or something like it was a big. I know that the Affordable Housing Trust actually made some allocation to do that. So don't quote me on that number exactly. We could look it up, but it wasn't cheap, and it just, this is just me projecting a little bit, but in order to make that part of the Concord system and get some benefits from it, we have to find an interconnect, and that interconnect is going to cost us some money. So that's all by way of saying whatever resources the sewer enterprise has for capital planning, I doubt, maybe they have that kind of money, but for that, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if they're going to be needing money anyway at some point.
100%, and maybe that's a bond type.
Yeah, it probably is.
But my only point is, like, let's not strip away all the money we need for
Right.
redevelopment.
My point is, what we save them today, they're gonna need to spend tomorrow.
Even a
we're
stronger
on
point for
short-
separating them,
We're on
right?
a pretty short time frame in that, let's call it within 2 or 3 years, the state is going to want to turn this over to a developer.
Yeah.
And I suspect that the long-term future of the treatment plant is going to take longer than that.
Right, but the ability of that plant to operate and how much, suppose we own it now we get to decide how much capacity gets allocated to what, including, and that's a negotiating point, I think.
I mean, the
And
state won't allow us to say we're not giving it what they need, right?
Well,
Right,
the
well,
legislation requires us to, Chris can correct me if I'm wrong, because he's read it, but probably read it more recently than I have, but it requires us to support the current users.
mhm.
It
So you
doesn't,
take
I
that
don't think
volume
it
up,
says, yeah, it doesn't say anything about future users.
which I think would be on the town to decide if they're able to expand it and,
Yeah.
all that. But,
I mean,
there's also an opportunity for a future developer or multiple developers to contribute to the cost of expansion or whatever the case may be.
I mean, a lot of people have, in a lot of different settings, tossed around this idea of, sort of 1/3 for, relieving the town, 1/3 for the redevelopment, and 1/3 for the
State.
for the existing state users. But that's just a concept.
Yeah, round numbers, that sounds to make sense, but
Yeah.
And that only works if we're able to get a permit increased to something.
Well, no, it works
Why?
within the existing permit. I mean, the existing permit's 310, and the state
Yeah,
chief.
but we're already 100,000 over our existing permit, and we have to give 100, however much we have to give to the state existing.
Yeah, I've heard.
I don't think that includes this plan.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
That's okay. It's a blur in your background.
No, sorry, I just can't hear. What did you guys say?
I thought that did not include the prison treatment plan.
Right.
It's what
Yeah.
exists today. We need 100,000 gallons, right? We're over our permit. What is it, 1.1, and we're using 1.2? And we're
I've
saying we
heard
get,
that statement, but I haven't heard it from Alan.
I heard it from Sven, the director of,
Yeah, and Sven said that recently, but Alan said something a couple days later that suggested that we're at 1 point. I mean, it's a rolling 12-month average, and we exceeded it during a period of exceptional rainfall.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people exceeded their permits during that event, and nobody's been called out on it, was the detail that I had understood about that. So, I mean, it's fair to
maybe the
understand
numbers
where
are wrong, but the concept that we don't have a zillion
we
gallons.
don't
to
have much. Yeah,
100%. But
That's
that was
right.
that's a big piece of the value
Yeah.
of acquiring the.
Right.
but
And we'll be able to ask for more if we connect them, right?
until the two systems are connected together, it's it's sort of immaterial. One system feeds one set, the other system feeds the other, and the permits are effectively separated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think to your point, Lee, it even more we discuss this, the more it makes sense to separate these funds even further, because quickly we will be eclipsed by what they need.
I think, and it's also fair to understand that they're largely separate transactions. Of course, how much ground the wastewater treatment facility actually sits on and what that ground is actually used for is an interesting question, because it could include a public works facility if it had enough land or something like that. So again, the negotiations are related, but I think financially it makes a lot of sense to separate it.
All right, so it sounds like let's start by I'll reach out to the other two subcommittees and have them kind of put together some numbers. And then we can start putting together some sort of matrix of funds and allocations.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Easy, done and done. And then, so we won't need that town meeting warrant until for a while, but it's better for us to get this going as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I would suggest that our interim target is some kind of report in March that sort of says, here's where we are in the budget planning, that we can use in conversations with our legislative reps.
That's great.
Especially if we want them to think about, maybe we could get another earmark in FY26 and the problem goes away. So,
Right.
those are
Now it's important we start having these
Yeah, I
conversations.
think we need to tee that conversation up.
Mark,
Because we could go, see, we figured out how to spend this and we're spending it responsibly, and thank you if you can give us some more.
Right. Chris, were you gonna say something?
yeah, sorry, just a few comments. So Mark, it sounds like, so the warrant closes, I think, on Tuesday. So it sounds like Carrie is going to put a placeholder of 200,000 in there for and then that'll be perfected over time
Yeah.
before the April 10th FinCom hearing, where
Is
they
that
hear.
just for wastewater or for the whole thing?
Whole thing.
I'm arguing for the whole thing.
But your 200,000, sorry to beat this up again, but your 200,000 was just for the planning, trying to get it in addition to the wastewater.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'd want that warrant article to say what you're saying, which is it's 200,000 just for planning, not dealing with wastewater. However we say that, that doesn't, tie our hands. to
Planning
that.
redevelopment of MCI, including but not limited
Yeah,
to the water treatment.
I'd word it broadly
Yep,
so that, if we got stuck and needed to spend some of it on wastewater, we could, but it's intended to allow us to support. I mean, there's the ARPA funding. We had said that there was going to be some ARPA for transportation planning, and I think some of that is in there. I don't think we've ever made an allocation for environmental studies of any kind. And that would be high on my list of things, because it's pretty clear that the state is pursuing a see no evil approach to.
Well, we're gonna get their phase 1 report, I assume, which is informed.
They're going to walk around and look at the ground barely below the depth of the soles of their shoes and say,
They're not selling the land to someone who hasn't.
yeah. But if we're one of the acquirers of any part of that land, we should probably be testing whatever part we're acquiring.
yeah, no, you heard
At a minimum.
DPM, Paul said they're figuring out what they can release publicly, so
Yeah.
that was interesting.
Yeah.
We want to know what they can't release publicly. That's the important stuff to us, right? Okay, well, I'll reach out to those guys and kind of get that started. The other big thing I want to talk about was that John Boynton reached out to me and said, hey, guys, basically you help us with these presentations, the different stakeholders, and we're named, I looked at I have the stakeholder list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 13 of them are assigned to us. I don't know how we want to do this. I know that also we just got an email, who is it, from Emily Rush, who asked if someone would present with her at Subcommittee, right, on March 25th. Did I make that up, Shannon?
What are we presenting? Or is
Just a
anyone-
project overview. So I just did this with the Concord Business Partnership. I thought John's presentation is fantastic. But I was there, and Peter was there, and we just kind of represented the two subcommittees, other subcommittees. So I think John, basically, from what I can gather, is just saying this is a lot of work for us, and you guys are named as the liaisons here. So please do something in a nice way. So let's talk about that and see how we reach out, it sounds like they're willing to send someone from their outreach committee too. I guess.
Does that mean just basically present his slide deck just to other people?
Yeah, I think his slide deck is really comprehensive, and then just answer questions. So I don't know if the best way to handle this. I mean, there's going to be an ask, obviously, to both you and Lee and Mark, if you could do any of these too.
Can we just do a global one on Zoom or something?
It's not a terrible idea.
Like, I don't really see the point of doing it 6 times.
Yeah, although depending on the agency and the audience, there's some there's some desire to kind of get into, okay, now you know where we stand, what can you do to help us, or how do we relate directly to you? And if we have too many people in the room, then that gets very fuzzy.
And to be fair, some of these people may not want to meet with us. So like the first 3, Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities, Secretary of Transportation, and Secretary of Public Safety and Security, those
They can ask DCAM.
They're right.
Yeah,
So they're probably going to say, forget it.
Housing and livable communities, though, to think about that for a second, isn't that where we want to talk about the deed restriction on Junction Village?
I'd say it's premature, but,
Yeah, because we're basically coming in and saying, do you want us to give you just an overview of what we've done so far? And they may not be interested at this point. I mean, we could ask, we've sent out those letters, right, Shannon? So we have a general communication out. I don't think anyone's like beating down our door to try to meet with us, right?
Did we get back specific contacts from any of these groups?
I mean, Chris shared some contact with me, like for some of the, state departments or offices that were listed on there, but I didn't receive responses back from anyone specifically after I sent the letter out.
So I think where we want to concentrate, Concord Housing Development Corporation, and like ORs, people that actually might want to be interested in hearing from us, maybe that's where we focus
Well,
first.
just see, Peter Loa and I are on CHTC, so they're
Yep.
pretty well briefed.
Yeah.
We don't,
But
we
you
don't,
guys don't want to hear from us.
they get briefed every meeting, so they.
Okay,
Lee's already taking care of that one.
Look at
Okay.
us, we're getting this
Send
done.
it back to John.
Right, ORs was one John specifically mentioned that we might want to reach out to.
Mhm.
Do we have a contact there?
And just, there's some sensitivity from the Friends of Warner's Pond anytime you ask to see oars.
Okay,
So I think that there that might be a case where it's worth it to think about who the, I don't know, I guess the water groups, for lack of a better, the people that have an interest in the river,
right,
and the waterways might want an opportunity there. Last night at the Warner's Pond Task Force meeting, we established that there's going to be a Warner's Pond public outreach on March 13th, which is going to present the sort of three options that are in play for Warner's Pond, the sort of enhanced management plan, which also involves a certain amount of wait and see, the dam removal or the dredging project. And I'm happy to, I'm up to my ears in that, but I think it's worth it for us to understand that that's a good place to, announce if there's going to be any kind of activity related to. And by the way, if you're interested in what's happening on the other side of the peninsula there.
yeah, I don't even see, is that Warner's Pond Task Force even on our list of stakeholders here? I'm not even sure it is. I mean, this just gets really complicated. I kind
Friends of
agree with-
Warner's Pond, Friends of
Oh,
Warner
Friends of Warner-
is on there, but they're probably not listed as a government one. They're probably one of the general stakeholders, so they got communicated with by.
It does make sense from what we're saying to say, okay, this is gonna be the presentation about waterways, right? And have it those,
Yeah.
as opposed to just go out individually. I guess doing this kind of on the fly, maybe. What do you guys think? Should I send out a list of the ones that we're tasked with and we can kind of
Yeah. Let's,
think about, again, the Secretary of Housing and Secretary of Transportation is not gonna wanna meet with us. Simon Cataldo's office doesn't need to meet with us. So some of these we might just immediately say, so why don't I circulate the list and everyone kind of give their thoughts?
yeah, why don't we, and we should decide which the priorities are. I mean,
Yeah.
you're already chasing, the historical commission, and I think that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yes,
We've already managed to, communicate with DOT, and we've got a process going with that. So
have you heard anything from them?
not since
DOT.
the meeting we had,
Okay.
but still there, I would call them engaged already, just like, CHDC is already engaged. So
Yes, I
we don't
agree.
need to back them up to the general, who are we stage. And I think that, to me, the message is, these are important relationships, and maybe we should think in terms of where are we in the relationship and what should we be doing to build that relationship more than did they get that specific presentation.
Okay. Sorry, I'm watching out the window as someone's dumping trash in my dumpster and I'm trying to figure out if they're authorized. doing a little police work while we're talking. Okay, so again, you think it makes sense to just circulate this amongst ourselves?
Yeah.
Okay, let me do that. Circulate, and then we'll make comments, and then we'll follow up, and
Yeah.
then again.
Let's put it on the next agenda for when we're going to do that. But I think the answer back to John is yes, of course, we'll help with the outreach on those groups.
Yes, yeah. Right.
Just housekeeping, we should send our comments all through Shannon.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucky Shannon.
Yeah.
I don't know how you keep track of your inbox, Shannon, with all these various committees, but okay. That all sounds good, which we should probably plan our next meeting then, because I know sometimes we get lost here. What are we thinking? I don't see much for us to do right now, or so should we do it in a month? Should we do early March?
So I'd like to spend some time on the budget idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that and the outreach for these, I don't think beyond that there's too much else to do. I guess the one other thing that I'm working on is we had the discussion in the advisory board about how to get the agency access to the site, and so I'm working on that. Probably the update is we're going to try to work that through Jeff Quick, who's been our sort of regular contact, rather than the media relations side, which seems to get involved whenever, you know, a state rep or somebody like that is doing. So we want them to have a more, you know, professional courtesy type of access. So I've already contacted Jeff, and I'm waiting to hear back to see whether we can get a call set up on that. The whole goal there is to get agency access on the 25th for the personnel to get an initial view, but, you know, hopefully, you know, access when they need it for more detailed work if they're going to, you know, whatever they're going to do. So that I think falls into our purview. So we might want to check on the status of how, you know, how we're doing with Department of Correction.
I would
Okay.
suggest that they also be encouraged to walk the site outside the walls.
Yeah, they have been.
The Junction Village site. And
Uh,
if they need a tour guide, I can do that.
Oh, good. Okay.
All right, so Mark, when are you thinking we should next meet?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess that was the question.
Just repeating it.
Yeah, because I digress. When's the next advisory board meeting, Shannon?
So we were trying to coordinate the kickoff meeting with the consultants, which I don't think is gonna be able to happen on the 24th.
Saw that.
So I would say the 25th, there would be a posted advisory board meeting. I heard back from the consultants this morning. I have to reach out to the board about that. But
Okay.
so short answer, the 25th.
How do you guys feel about 2 weeks on the 26th, and then we can debrief that? We can obviously talk about what we're trying to do and give them the budget ask.
So you're saying February 26th or March 26th?
I was thinking February 26th.
February 26th. Yeah, I mean, I'll
yeah.
circulate this as soon as possible. I don't, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lee.
I'm out of town.
How are you? Okay.
You can carry on without me.
No, we won't do that. What about the, are
Do you
you
have
back in the
availability?
next,
Sorry.
What?
Go ahead.
next week, the first week of March?
I'm out the 26th through the 5th. So once we hit the week of the 10th, I'm good.
Great, and that's when I'm opening my MIT store, so, as long as we're on Zoom, I guess it's fine. Any day for you work that week, Mark?
The week of the 10th,
Yeah,
is that what we're talking about? Yeah, those are fine.
any chance we could do Monday of that week, Monday the 10th?
Yes,
Okay, Monday the 10th, let's say noon again. No,
I am gonna flag that that would be a potential advisory board meeting.
I just saw that. All right. 11th I can't do, 12th will be, well.
so the 12th puts us out of the month.
12th does put us out of month. All right, should we say the 12th at noon?
That will work for me.
Will or won't?
It will.
Okay, great. So in the meantime, there'll be a lot of back and forth going through not us, but through Shannon. So, yeah.
Yeah,
And then in terms of Jeff Quick, so Mark, you're following up.
right.
Yes,
Yeah.
if you need an additional support, let us know, but
So my goal there is to establish, the ask coming from the select board, and then hopefully, and Shannon, you or Chris can help me out here, but I'm hoping that we can get something that works at a staff level so that when agency says their environmental person needs to go on site, they can just get in there. I don't want to be involved in the middle of this
every time they need
every
to get in
single
there.
time. I'm just looking to establish some process that we can use. So I'll work with staff to try and get that done.
That sounds great. Okay. Man, it is complicated trying to organize this committee through the other committee through,
Hmm.
having to go through all these layers is tough, but I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Anything else from anyone? Any public comment? We have 2 people on. Wow.
Great.
No. Okay. Anything else, Shannon, Chris? Okay.
Motion
great.
adjourned.
To adjourn, great.